So we leverage that as the strength, and we try to be quicker than the other one. So usually we try to be the first one to say yes to a startup.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. Matthew Grant here, partner at Instech London and your host for our weekly podcast. Now, thank you very much for joining me. There are so many podcasts now jostling for time in your day that I am really thrilled you could join us. If you're like us and many of the people we're talking to each week, I suspect things are getting very busy again in the last couple of weeks. We're certainly seeing a renewed confidence and a desire to get back to work from most of our members and followers. Now, Florian Graillot will be familiar to you if you're a regular user of Twitter or LinkedIn and are following what's going on in insurance and technology. He reports widely, frequently, and with some authority on what is happening in the European insurance and technology scene. But despite being one of the most prolific voices in this area, Florian does actually have a different full-time job. He is the founder and partner of astoryavc, an investment fund getting involved in seed rounds for technology-enabled startups that are providing services to the European insurance market. Not surprisingly then, Florian has some excellent insights into what is topical at the moment, explained what he looks for in companies that he invests in, and even reveals how and why he is able to comment so actively in social media as well as do his regular job. On the subject of insights, if you have not already found our weekly newsletter and you think these podcasts are useful, then you might want to take a look at the newsletter itself. I assemble these every week. It goes out Wednesday morning, 7 o'clock sharp, and it's our view on the things that we think you might find useful, whether you're an insurer, technologist, or indeed anybody else interested in innovation. You can find the sign up by clicking on the yellow button top right of the Instech London website or in the episode notes. Now hang on into the end to get to the answer to last week's competition question, and this week we've got something to give away if you get back to us in time. Now, back to Florian. So, another wonderful guest today, Florian Graillot, someone else who's studied engineering. It seems to be a bit of a theme from people in the world of insurance and innovation these days. Florian is today a partner at astorya.vc. He's a mentor for Open Insurance Initiative. Florian, you were previously at Aazzur Strategic Investors. You've been investing for about 10 years now, although interesting to see that you moved from investing in property to investing in technology and then more recently in insurance back in 2014. So, welcome to the Instech London podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very glad to be with you today.
It seems like quite a few people have done things outside of insurance and then at some point in their career discovered insurance and now are making a business there. What was it that took you from property into insurance?
I've always been very interested in technology. I was degreed from an engineering school, and I always invested in startups since I earned my life, let's say. And I think that insurance is first a huge market, and there is a huge opportunity in terms of applying and embracing technologies. I think what's very interesting as an investor is to try to spot the technology that will have a dramatic impact on an industry. And I had the opportunity to join Aazzur Strategic Venture a few years ago. So I would say I was at the right place at the right time.
Well, and it's quite a bold move to shift from working for a large corporation, well-funded, reasonably stable career to setting up your own VC fund in particular. I think you set Astorya up in 2017. So just interested in what it was that gave you the confidence to move out on your own and who your backers are.
My partner Jan was at Hermes Digital Agency, part of Allianz, while I was at AXA Ventures. So meaning that we were among the two biggest players in Europe with, let's say, complementary vision on the market. And we had exactly the same analysis on the market, which was first, insurance is a big market enough to have a standalone fund, versus considering insurtech as only a subsidiary or only a vertical of the fintech market. And the second point is regarding the seed level of investment, because if you have a look at who is investing in insurtech, most of the time it's fintech funds that are big, too big to invest at seed stage. And if you have a look at corporate themselves, usually they are looking for startups with whom they could partner, meaning that they are looking for more mature startups that have already customers, that have already a track record, and so on, meaning that both fintech fund and corporates are investing in later insurtech startups, leaving the seed stage quite empty. So that's where Astoria is coming from, trying to invest before any other fund on the market, and feeding the market with a quite interesting startup with a very strong and unique focus on insurance. So that's why we managed, by the way, to raise money from insurance players themselves, because I think that we are ticking a box, a kind of unique box, let's say, in terms of investment.
Yeah, I mean, that space is, as you said, there's not many, certainly professional organizations investing at seed level, which is difficult. And I guess it's even particularly difficult in the last few months. When you talk about seed, depending on which country you're in, seed can mean different levels of funding. But what typical range are you looking to invest at for seed?
Actually, that's a great feedback, and we are always, let's say, trying to put figures or to better define what we mean behind seed stage, because I think that many investors are using the word. At least the way we define it is regarding the maturity of the startup in terms of product development. So basically, when we say we can invest at seed stage, it means that we invest post-product. So we don't have any requirement in terms of revenues, and we have even invested in a startup that was almost pre-launched, meaning that the technology again was ready, but the product and the solution was not yet on the market. So basically, it was related to a market that we know very well, where we could be very helpful with the startup. But again, we define seed stage with product done, and then depending again on the technology, depending on the market, depending on how the startup is consistent with our network, we are quite confident to look for the first customer with entrepreneurs. So that's how we define seed stage.
Interesting. And so since 2017, there's three companies, certainly identified three companies that you publicly talk about. I think there might be a couple more in the portfolio. Can you just talk a little bit about both who you're investing in just now and a little bit about what focus you have for your investments?
We raised the first fund end of 2018, meaning that we've been live on the market for, let's say, around 18 months. And over those 18 months, we've invested in 5 startups. So we are, let's say, on track with our plan. So 3 of them are public. So we have Zelros, AI in insurance based in France. We have Wetterheld, parametric insurance for SMEs in Germany. This is the one that was pre-launch when we put money on them. And the last one that was publicly announced earlier this year is Aazzur, and they are doing bank insurance in the digital age. What was very interesting with them is that they are applying open insurance and leveraging the PSD2 regulation with a pure insurance use case, which is quite rare in Europe, because most of them, and I guess that you know that very well in the UK, most of the open banking related startups are doing fintech or finance or purely finance results and use cases. Aazzur is the pure insurance use case. And beyond the 3 ones that are kind of public, we have done 2 deals recently, one in cyber security, because we think that insurance, cyber insurance will surge, and luckily or unfortunately, the current crisis showed that we were right, as the cyber threat is surging. So here it's pure technology on top of which we will try to make a link with insurance and cyber insurance especially. And the last one that we closed during the lockdown is very related to our thesis, let's say, on distribution through platform. This one is in Spain and should be announced, I would say, in the next weeks.
I'm sure they're thrilled to get their funding, whilst everybody else is heads down and trying to figure out, where their next business opportunity is going to come from. So, just want to touch back on those again a bit. Are they all simply technology plays, or maybe some of them sound like they might be MGAs or brokers? I mean, Wetterheld with the weather insurance parametric? Are they actually doing some of the underwriting or transacting some of the risk, or is it just a purely technology offering?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think that all of them have technology in common, because when we see InsurTech, in InsurTech, it's obvious that there is the word technology. And that's where we think we are relevant, is to leverage technology and apply it in insurance. So basically, that's the first focus that we have when we have a look at a startup. But indeed, you mentioned Wetterheld. They are on the distribution part, but they are, again, much more than that. They have the risk engine, and that's the asset that we are leveraging to make it happen. And for the Spanish company I mentioned, they are on the distribution side, and they are an MGA, because they are helping insurers distribute their product on platforms. So obviously they are a broker. We are quite flexible on whether the startup is an MGA itself or pure technology, as long as there is a technology behind the scene. Because we think that first, this is the only way to have a competitive edge. And this is the only way to compete with incumbents. So that's why, for instance, on the cyber security space, we started from an investment in pure technology, and we will try to build cyber insurance on top, obviously partnering with insurers themselves. But we start from a pure technology play that actually incumbents cannot play themselves. That's our thesis.
Just to talk a bit about that, because I think one of the challenges I think in building a cyber company is there are a lot of people and organizations out there who claim to be able to do cyber analytics. My view is, unless an organization's got some specific unique partnerships that distinguish them from other people out there, it is actually quite difficult to look different. So can you talk a little bit about, to the extent you're kind of able to share it just now before you go public on your company you're investing in, but if you're looking at a cyber company and you talk about technology, what distinguishes that company from the 100 other companies that claim they can do cyber analytics for SME or corporates?
Yeah, that's a very good feedback. And actually, we had exactly the same analysis as yours on the market, because we've been tracking cyber insurance and more generally cyber security for almost since inception. We've even wrote an article, I think, beginning of 2018 on the opportunity around cyber insurance. And it was very tricky between one company to another one to spot the one that had really a technology behind the scene. So that's why we have invested in a startup in France that is coming from, I mean, the two founders have been working in cybersecurity for a very long time, and actually they will be soon licensed by the cyber regulator in France. So that's why we managed to assess that they had a very strong technology, because they were applying for that kind of label in France, and there is nobody in France able to say that the technology is good, better than this authority.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's the same way that regulation drives a lot of innovation, and that's a very credible mark for companies if the regulators accept output generated from their analytics. Just want to come back to Wetterheld as well, because we've been covering parametric insurance. I read an article on it recently, which interestingly got a lot of response from people who weren't included in it. I mean, how are they getting on? Is it early stage yet, or are they actually starting to do some deals?
They are early stage still, but back to our definition of seed stage, they are a bit more mature, because first they launched a product and they have already generated a few sales. So obviously they are still on their journey to the product market fit, but they have already several insurance products available against drought, against rain. They have a very strong focus on agriculture. Obviously, due to the lockdown, they had to shut down a few products temporarily. I mean, everything related to outdoor businesses as restaurants, hotels, festival, and so on, were, let's say, locked down themselves. What is interesting here is that they have the risk engine. I think that this is the key asset, especially in that space. I think that cyber insurance and weather insurance have in common that there are only few data available on the market. Not all of the insurance themselves are doing this kind of product. So meaning that they don't have that much amount of historical data. And that's the major difference between those kind of new risks. That's how we call them. Maybe we will talk later on about freelancers and so on. So all those new risks, I think that the competition from existing player is lower, and that's the opportunity we try to leverage thanks to technology. So here on parametric insurance, I know that basically you are covering that space, and that would be great maybe to hear your thought as well on which are the use cases to apply parametric insurance. But I think that there is a very strong use case here, and a really great opportunity to compete against incumbents.
It has got that characteristic, which is providing potentially new areas of covering insurance. I mean, there's certainly a few people I've spoken to in the parametric space who are offering insurance where in the past farmers hadn't been able to insure their field, or they wanted it much more localized. And I guess, it's a similar question to that cyber one, actually, which is, as you look at or Wetterheld look at where they get their data from, are they accessing unique data, or is the value you see more around how they analyze the data and and the power of that distribution?
I think it's a bit of both. So obviously they are leveraging mainly public data, and in their case, they are leveraging local data because they are selling their product to SMEs. So I think that it's very important for the final customers to better understand how the engine is running. And when you say that you are leveraging local data, I think it helps sell the insurance product, because then the final customer can trust the data are consistent with his playground or her playground. So that's how I see it on data. And I think that the second major strength is how they are leveraging those data. And here it's algorithm, it's the risk engine that they have built, which is very consistent. And I think that, again, you need to have both. So obviously, the data are public, so you can assume that big players might leverage those data. The fact is, again, having this very local set of data unable to be closer to the final customer. Plus, it means that you will have at the beginning a smaller market, though I think at the European level, the market is huge. And in terms of building algorithm, then you need to re-engineer everything when you are an incumbent, because you usually rely on historical data, whereas here you need to rely on live data, and you don't have that much data on claim, etc., which is again the case for regular business line, home, health, cars, and so on. So I think it's a very different way to leverage the opportunity, and that's where I think there is a huge opportunity for startup to compete with incumbent, because again, first, not all incumbents are doing this kind of products, and second, everybody, incumbents and startup, are starting from scratch.
One of the challenges I think with all these new initiatives, whether it's parametric risk for weather or it's cyber, is there actually needs to be a frequency of claims that people are experiencing and actually seeing the payout coming through in a way that defines or demonstrates the value of the offering. The difficulty is if it's offering something that is unusual. I mean, this is kind of a classic problem with sort of earthquake risk. Then people just sort of forget about it and assume it's not going to happen to them. Or as I'm sure you're very familiar with the case in Malawi with the African risk capacity, where the payout didn't actually occur despite the fact there was flooding and farmers losing their maize crops. So you sort of get that challenge of, on the one hand, just not enough claims for people to worry about it, or on the other hand, losses happen and the payouts don't happen. So you've got to sort of figure out how to make sure that either the basis risk is minimized or there's some kind of backstop that actually covers it if the basis risk means that the coverage doesn't technically pay out, but people still get taken care of. I think that will really define how well parametric indices develop or not.
Obviously, when the insurance product is not mandatory, there is a challenge to sell the product. So that's obvious. But I would say that parametric is the sales process, because there is no negotiation. I mean, everything is written in the contract. So obviously, you know that if it's raining, then you get reimbursed. But I would say that you're utterly right saying that then you need to explain how it works. And I think that the best ad for this kind of product is when there is a claim. There is no negotiation. There is no fight between the customer and the insurance player. Everything being written ahead of the claim, and then you get reimbursed very quickly. So I think that the value proposition is very clear, but I agree with you that there's a need to have a claim and to show that it works to then convince customers. So I assume that for those very small players where the brand is obviously less known than the big names on insurance, AXA, Allianz, and so on, obviously for those startups, Flood Flash, Wetterheld, and so on, they will have to show that actually their technology works and that they can reimburse their customer very quickly to then convert more customer. But as soon as they will have a few examples like that, then I assume that the sales process will accelerate.
Absolutely. In fact, it could be a great way of the entire insurance industry demonstrating it adds value, which is you have a loss, your claim gets paid, and you don't have to worry about all the negotiation in the middle, whether it's an indemnity-based claim or by a traditional incumbent or whether it's parametric. So yeah, I think it'd be really interesting to see how that space develops. I just want to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in Europe generally, or maybe more specifically, because there is some differences by country. So I think you're investing in Europe, and I think you include UK in your definition of Europe. So thank you for broadening your investment to UK companies. But what sorts of trends are you seeing coming out across the main European countries in terms of technology and insurance?
Since inception, we have been covering Europe, and indeed we are considering UK, Switzerland, and the Nordics in our scope. And actually, we are quite impressed by how the markets are different from each other. So I mean that if you take France, for instance, at least the first wave of insurtech players were mainly B2C, focusing on existing business lines. So a lot of car insurance, home insurance, a bit of health insurance with Alan, for instance, which is, I think, the most visible French insurtech startup across Europe. So that's for France. I would say that in UK, quite interesting as well, because it started with a lot of life insurance related players. And we saw a lot of commercial lines related insurtech startups. So I remember that end of 2018, we released a kind of map of what's happening in Europe. And what was very interesting was that it was less than 2 years ago. Most of the commercial line, if not all of the commercial lines, insurtech we spotted in Europe were in the UK. So it changes a bit, and we see a few startups, even in France, that are trying to address that market. But still, UK is leading the wave here. In Germany, I would say we see a lot of technology applied to insurance. And here, I would say that there is no very strong pattern. We see B2C, we see B2B, we see enterprise software, we see MGA. But I would say that technology is at the heart of innovation in Germany. If you take Italy, for instance, there are a lot of telematics, but we strongly believe that there is value across countries. And by the way, if you take our portfolio, again, 5 deals done in 18 months, we have 4 countries in our portfolio.
Yeah, so it's impressive. And I think you mentioned that in France, you did some research in the last 18 months, and there are only 30 startups in France. Is that right?
That's why as well, we are covering only Europe, because we are deeply rooted in Europe. We know almost everybody in Europe. We are well connected with local ecosystems. That's what we are selling basically to our investor. And I think that this is why they are trusting what we are doing.
I think the other thing, just as you mentioned those themes there, is it sort of reflects, not surprisingly, what the history is of different countries. So Italy was one of the first to embrace telematics 10 years ago, and big supporter of that. The UK, with Direct Line, 30 years ago now, using telephone for insurance, and then very quickly getting into online insurance. It's sort of now is looking for the next stage ahead. So I think what is interesting with those geographical distinctions is a reminder that that Europe as a continent, or politically, it is a bunch of different countries doing things in different ways, isn't it? Where the opportunities can grow in one area, but actually potentially can leapfrog into new countries quite quickly if you're sort of getting ahead of the market.
The idea is we invest in one country, and then as we have deep roots in every other country, then we try to scale the solution. And that's the link behind technology, because to scale, you need to have technology. So that's the rationale behind our setup. And by the way, maybe you have an insight on why the UK is so bullish and so crowded in terms of commercial line versus other country, because that's something I've been exploring since inception. And I'm always impressed by how many commercial lines related insurtech there are in the UK compared to all other markets, including France and and Germany. So maybe you have a clue here.
Yeah, well, maybe people just like trying to solve difficult problems. I mean, the commercial space is as you know, is a tough one to get right from the analytics, because the data is often not as good. It's still very much a broker-led market, and actually, I don't think anybody is really in a hurry or expecting to see the brokers go away, except maybe on the very small, the small of the SME side. But I think also, as you've mentioned before, the role of Lloyd's and London market in a specialty business is commercial focused, and I think again the pure geography and concentration of people in that space. I mean, if you can go and see 10, 20 potential clients very easily just by walking down the street, or at least that's what used to happen, it should be easier to be able to grow in that space. Much harder if you're based in the US or even in sort of maybe Germany, where insurance is a bit more diversified across the country, I think, to be able to have those discussions. So I think it's a combination of need, access, but frankly, there are a few of those where you can point to initiatives that have really shifted what's happening. I mean, I think one example is Consiris with what they're doing on marine, but it's taken them quite a few years to be able to get there, but they're finally breaking into that space and getting credibility around it. But there's a lot of interest, but still not that many companies that are really making a difference.
So that's why we are exploring that space, because we think that the opportunity is still big. And by the way, the market is huge. So if entrepreneurs are listening to us, feel free to launch and kick off business in that space.
So on that one, Florian, you must get a lot of people coming to you and offering their businesses. And what is the process you use to review incoming requests for funding?
We have two ways to spot startups. So obviously, a lot of founders across Europe sent us their deck, and thanks again for that. We review the deck, and basically what triggers the next step for us is whether there is tech behind the scene. So I assume that you've got the point that we are very tech oriented. We need to clearly understand the market and to see how to leverage our network, because I think that beyond euros that we can bring to startup, what matters is how supportive we are, and I think that here you can easily ask our portfolio company. We try to be hands-on, and we try to accelerate the sales process, we work on the product itself, and obviously we try to share visibility for our portfolio companies. And on the other hand, we have developed our own scouting technology. So basically, this is a bot that is crawling public newspaper, public social networks, and trying to identify startups. So here, it's mainly useful to spot startups that are not yet on the market, that have not raised money, because again, we try to invest very early in startup journey as soon as the product is live. We have a very regular process to invest with the due diligence on the founder themselves, on the market, on the technology itself, and we try to be quick while doing deals, because again we are a small fund, so we leverage that as a strength, and we try to be quicker than the other one. So usually we try to be the first one to say yes to a startup, and then we try to gather investor around us. So that's what we did, for instance, in Wetterheld. That's what we did on the cybersecurity, and that we will soon do on the insurtech in Spain that I mentioned earlier. So basically, always the same pattern. If we are interested, we try to move quickly, and then we try to work as close as possible with founders.
The idea of the bot crawling across Europe, finding opportunities, it sort of syncs up very nicely with your concept of being able to assess and invest in technology companies. I mean, almost the first rule these days of running a successful company is to get the technology right. And it just so happens you happen to be investing in other companies I find it really impressive, frankly, and actually for you personally, because you're running your own business, you're investing in companies, you said you spend time on the boards, and you're also very active in talking about what you're seeing and what you're doing. So just on that latter point, I mean, how do you define the time, or are you very clever and you manage to delegate it to other people to go and publish the research and talk about what's going on and get the visibility that way, as well as doing your day job?
I think it's part of my job. I kicked it off a few years ago. I was in a previous fund in France. And I remember it was my early days, let's say, in VCs, and there were a lot of VCs that were well known on the market, and I was not. So when you start your career as a VC, you need to generate deal flow, and I thought that one way to generate deal flow was to be visible where other people were not, and it was on social network, starting with Twitter. Now I'm much more balanced, let's say, between Twitter and LinkedIn, because I think that the audiences are a bit different, or at least my audiences are a bit different. On Twitter, it's mainly startup oriented. On LinkedIn, it's much more corporate. So I use them a bit differently. But at the end of the day, and again, it's purely part of my job, because that's where I can find, let's say, research on the market. I can get trends on the market. I can discuss and engage with European players. And again, we have only 24 hours a day. So the challenge is how to manage everything at the same time. And I think that being visible on social network is useful both to generate deal flow. It's useful to generate potential limited partners or investors in our fund. And it's useful in terms of business development for our portfolio company, because we share our network with them. We strengthen their visibility. And I think that, again, this is one part of our job. I will take another example that you are very familiar with, the one on parametric insurance. You wrote a very nice article with, if I remember well, 12 startups doing parametric insurance in Europe. So it was a great way to push what is parametric insurance, but obviously it was a way to promote our portfolio company on top of this article. So again, both activity, publishing on social network, and doing my job as a VC are really close to each other. This is a competitive edge as well, because it takes a lot of time to build such an audience. I'm pushing 4 tweets a day, every year, since 5 or 6 years right now. So it's a huge commitment, and that's what people are looking for, I guess, on my Twitter. Plus, I don't use any bot. I think that this is key. I'm writing down all my tweets. So when people come to my Twitter account or my LinkedIn account, first they know that I have selected the article I'm pushing, and then they know that I have, let's say, took the extract or the value of this article, and they know again that when I do a comment, when I push an article, it's myself, it's not a bot.
No, that's very impressive. But I think you gave away your secret, Florian. You just mentioned there are 24 hours in a day, so I've just realized you don't actually sleep, and that's how you manage to cram it all in.
That's related to the automated scouting technology that we've built, because it all started with social network, because we realized that social network were a great way to spot startup, and then we had 2 ways to do it, either manually or with an automated scouting. So obviously we choose the second option, and that's where it's coming from. So now we are crawling way beyond social networks, but it all started with that idea.
Very impressive. Now I just want to talk a little bit about where you see the futures going, and a lot of what we've seen in the last 5 years, since the term insurtech has really started to get widely adopted, was the sort of the concept of either the full stack technology company, or certainly organizations that were building solutions where they wanted to sit on the underwriter's desktop, or maybe a different part of the organization. Now it looks like we're moving much more towards a world where the platforms are going to be critical, and it's just going to get harder. I mean, it always has been hard, but I think it's going to get harder to find a space on that underwriting desktop. You've talked a bit about APIs. You're a mentor for the Open Insurance Initiative, but how does that fit with your view as to how the future is evolving? You're moving from a sort of standalone application to much more integration across and working with some of the leading technology players.
Yeah, I think that you perfectly summarized how the insurtech scene has evolved over the last 5-6 years. I would say that there were 3 waves. So the first wave, I would say 2014, 2017, a lot of B2C insurtech players addressing existing business line. Then the second wave, I think 2017, 2019, where insurers had a deeper look at those players and realized that the figures were not that impressive. And I think that the third wave started in 2020 and is only accelerated by the current crisis we are facing, is, okay, maybe B2C player will not kill insurance player, but technology player might have a dramatic impact. So you mentioned API, for instance. I think that API will have a dramatic impact on distribution. You may know that we are very bullish on distribution of insurance products through platforms, and I think that it's all about API. So if you are an insurance player with API available on shelves, then you can keep existing in the new world. I mean, where distribution will go through platform and e-commerce websites. If you don't have API available, then you might be in danger. So that's the reality. You mentioned underwriting. I think it's a key topic. We see a few startups right now addressing that part. It's all about data. So I think it's related to the earlier discussion we had on new risks. Because again, if you take existing business line, obviously insurers have a lot of data. But when you take new risk, then everybody starts from scratch. And here, startup might be more relevant with their AI algorithm than insurers with their actuaries. But I think that we see an acceleration here, again, because insurance players realize that they cannot do everything internally. And that's the pattern we see among incumbents. They start trying to do themselves, and then they realize that they are too slow, that they don't have the right talents, or they don't have the budget, or for many reasons, they realize that they cannot do everything on their own. So that's the famous make or buy questions. And what is very interesting is that at the end of 2018, we were asked a lot about augmented insurer. And I think that the crisis we went through, and especially the lockdown period, just highlighted how important it was to deliver technologies, software, tools to existing players. So I think that the most attractive startup for us are the ones that are leveraging the technology and delivering that technology for the use of insurers. And the big player in Europe, WeFox, is another example of that, technology for incumbents. So I know that in fintech, at the beginning of the year, they reversed the words. Instead of saying fintech, they were saying tech for fin. I think that maybe this is beyond the joke on the word itself. I think that this is the major trend that we will see in the next months. It's tech for insurers.
What's your view on how the insurance organizations, the incumbents, how have they evolved in terms of their ability to be able to work with technology coming in? That's been one of the challenges for a lot of companies, and actually even the challenges people within those innovation organizations themselves has been able to deploy the technology across the company. Are you seeing some more encouraging signs about that changing now, so that people are actually able to, on both sides, to start to work with some of the newer technology?
End of 2019, we started to see corporates saying, okay, we don't want to partner with many startups. We want to partner with a few startups that could deliver results. And I think that the current crisis will accelerate that move for a startup that have a true value proposition and are delivering a real value to their customers. I think that we move from, there are a lot of issues, we need to fine tune, we need to test, we need to blah, 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 to, okay, let's do it because we don't have other options. So I hope that it will give a bit more flexibility to work with startups, not trying to apply corporate processes to very tiny companies, and much more, let's say, focus on results. And then if you want to, let's say, move to production and put it at a larger scale, then obviously you need to have a stronger check on processes, security, and so on. But at the very beginning, just to try whether it delivers a result or not, usually you don't need all the heavy corporate processes. So again, I hope that it will accelerate the pace and it will smoothen the relationship between corporate and startup. And I would say that based on the few discussions we had with corporates during the lockdown period and even more recently, it seems that they are more eager, let's say, to move forward, to embrace technology. But I think that it will raise a challenge for startups themselves, meaning that only the startups that have a strong value proposition will be relevant. Because if corporates start looking at results, then it means as a startup, you need to deliver results. So I think that there will be a race towards more value proposition and a startup with a strong asset answering a real need will be more relevant in the coming months.
I completely agree. I mean, it comes back to the ability to actually use platforms as a partner to access companies, to identify where the real opportunities are. Well, Florian, that's been really, really interesting. You mentioned briefly about the article I'd written on parametric insurance, and we've got a number of those coming out around different themes. There seems to be, I think a lot of value of looking at the companies out there on either or both a solution or a technology angle, meaning like parametric or cyber or IoT. I think we sort of moved on from the top 100 insurtechs to watch. And we're certainly seeing a lot of engagement on that. So hopefully we'll be able to include some of your companies in those lists going forward. Anything final you want to add that we haven't had a chance to talk about, or any sort of news you want to share?
I would say that no, unfortunately, we didn't manage, let's say, to sign quickly enough our last investment to be able to announce it during the podcast. But I think that obviously we will follow up very quickly, and again, we will have, I think, a very exciting investment to announce in Spain very shortly. I would say by the end of the month would be great, and I hope and I think that you will hear about it very soon.
Excellent. Well, I also very much look forward to coming back to Paris before too long. I think you're ahead of us in terms of being actually allowed out and get back onto the streets and enjoy bistro life. But I'm a very big fan of Paris, and I think it's always very healthy to discuss innovation and technology and everything actually in a different country as well. So hopefully we'll get some time face to face together before too long.
It would be great indeed to reopen, let's say, all face-to-face discussions. But I think that we will have the opportunity to see each other again and engage with the insurtech scene across Europe, hopefully very soon.
Good. Well, Florian, thank you very much. Most enjoyable.
Thanks a lot.
Well, that's a lot of content. If you didn't get it all and want a transcript, then contact me via LinkedIn or matthew@instech.london. Now, at Instech London, our goal is first to help insurers, brokers, and investors see through the noise and hype and find the best companies to partner with. And for technology companies, we're helping the ones we believe are offering great products, a way to reach out to our community of insurers and investors. If you're not yet a corporate member and want to find out what we're offering or how to sponsor some of our great live chat events, contact me or at hello@instech.london. Finally, you've made it this far, so the answer to last week's question on the podcast, which was what is the bird singing in the background when Robin was talking? So here's a reminder of what you may have heard. And the answer is a house sparrow. And our gift for this week, so for the first 10 people that email us and tell us you like one of these to hello@instech.london, is our limited edition Instech London digital pig t-shirt as shown on the photographs from our Christmas party. Back next week, Sunday morning, sharp. See you then.